so sharing with us this morning. May your message conveyed through your vessels move is to action in making our world a better place for all. Amen. While many of our rebuff events begin with the singing of the national anthem, we would like to take this opportunity to celebrate the beauty of Blackness and the resiliency of our Black community by kicking off with Lift Every Voice and Sing, also known as the Black National Anthem. Lift Every Voice and Sing was a hymn written as a poem by NAACP leader James Weldon Johnson in 1900. His brother John Rosamond Johnson composed the music for the lyrics. A choir of 500 children at the segregated St. School, where James Weldon Johnson was principal, first performed the song in public in Jacksonville, Florida, to celebrate President Abraham Lincoln's birthday. At the turn of the 20th century, Johnson's lyrics eloquently captured the solemn yet hopeful appeal for the liberty of Black Americans, set against the religious infection of God and the promise of freedom. The song was later adapted by NAACP and prominently used as a rallying cry during the civil rights movement of the 1950s and the 1960s. The lyrics can be found on the screen. Please sing along if you feel comfortable doing so. Now join us in welcoming the students of our Buff Jesuit choir led by Mr. Matthew Tipple. It is now my pleasure to welcome Darren Gray, class of 23, for our first student reflection.
This year, 2023, marks 60 years since Dr. Martin Luther King delivered his renowned I Have a Dream speech. Martin Luther King Day has always been a bit of a bittersweet celebration for me. While I obviously believe Dr. King deserves to be recognized for all of his contributions to the civil rights movement, I've grown frustrated because every single year, schools give the same abridged version of his life story, and his I Have a Dream speech is usually only one of the few, if not the only work of his that is mentioned. King is best known for this speech because people find it easy to discuss, as it promotes a message of love, unity, and hope. It makes people feel all warm and fuzzy inside. It's comfortable. But often forgotten are the excerpts of speeches where he forces us to reflect inward, talks about the steps necessary in order to achieve this vision of unity, and criticizes the people who stand in the way of it. In his book, Stride Towards Freedom, The Montgomery Story, King said that he who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetrate it. He who accepts evil without protesting it is really cooperating with it. This is very similar to a claim he made in his more famous letter from Birmingham jail when he said, "The Negro's great stumbling block in the stride towards freedom is not the white citizen's counselor or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice." This absence of tension is what allows the people in our society who have privilege to carry on their lives without guilt. But I assure you, the tension can still be felt very strongly by those of us on the margins. I have attended small, private, predominantly white schools like Brebeuf my entire life. In middle school especially, it felt like I could not escape the microaggressions. It seemed like the kids in my class did not know how to make a joke without mentioning race, skin color, or facial features. And while to them, they may have just been jokes, they had serious, long-lasting effects on my mental health and self-image. And as a fair-skinned black person, I only know the half of it, as the majority of these jokes were targeted at my darker-skinned peers. I was never great at standing up for myself or my friends, so I often brushed these comments off like they were not problematic. The biggest reaction I gave was maybe a disapproving look or an eye roll. I attended this school for 9 years, and that small group of kids was basically all that I knew. So I feared creating deeper conflict or further ostracizing myself. Although everybody makes mistakes at such a young age, and hindsight is 20/20, this is something I've never been fully able to forgive myself for. My choosing to say nothing made the white kids in my class think that their language and behavior were acceptable. My inaction only allowed the hurt and discrimination to continue. There are many debates in this life that we can choose to stay in the middle for. We've come to agree to disagree on a variety of topics, like whether we actually use math in the real world. I definitely don't. Whether flare leggings are still part of dress code. I think so. Or what color grapes taste best. It's red. But human rights is not one of these things we can agree to disagree on. When it comes to the topic of racial injustice, staying neutral is choosing a side. A friend to all is a friend to none. It does not make you more mature to be willing to hear both sides of the issue without critical analysis. It just makes you complicit in the ongoing injustice. I understand that the reason many people stay quiet when they witness injustice is to preserve that sense of order that King talks about. It's what has allowed white people to live such comfortable lives. Which leads me to another quote of King's I wanted to discuss. "The measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." Throughout high school, I've become much more vigilant at holding people accountable on their language than when I was younger. Finding your voice is a part of growing up. The solitude of the pandemic allowed me the space to discover what makes me comfortable and what impassions me. I became much more vocal about my opinions on social issues following George Floyd's murder and the protests that flooded the streets in response. This caused me to have to reevaluate my relationship with a lot of my peers. I've learned that the real friends will try to learn from their mistakes rather than immediately making excuses for their choice of words. Real allies see me for all that I am acknowledge the differences in our lifestyles, and choose to love me in spite of them. Or even better, they choose to love me because of them. A major part of the reason I felt hopeless to stand up against racist comments in middle school is that even when somebody did decide to speak out, the administration typically did nothing, despite how much my school preached diversity. Although Brebeuf has a similar school setup, I think this place does a much better job at addressing race issues than my K-8 school. However, I've always had one issue that's not related to the administration directly, but to the classroom environment. Many times in educational spaces, we're given the option to opt out of our uncomfortable conversation, students and teachers alike, including in classes where it's a huge element of the curriculum. In social justice class, for example, the entire goal is to listen to various viewpoints about current issues, but last year, many of my peers reported that their teachers would shut down class conversation at the first sense of tension or discord in the room, and the same exact thing happened in my class. At our last convocation, we heard students who attended the Pine Ridge trip give a reflection on their experience, and there's a small piece of those reflections that has stuck with me ever since. Junior Emma Broach said that discomfort is the greatest teacher. And I think that's a theme that we all need to carry with us throughout our daily lives. It's part of human nature to avoid feelings of discomfort, but without discomfort, we cannot learn a thing. Without discomfort, we cannot grow individually or as a community. We should be uncomfortable with the way our present-day America operates because it continues to mistreat the very people who built it up. We should be uncomfortable with the way our present-day America operates because it continues to mistreat the very people who built it up. It's not enough to say that you are not racist or bigoted just to establish that cognitive dissonance for yourself. And for those who aren't familiar with the term, cognitive dissonance is when a person's actions don't match up with the beliefs they claim to hold. So they start doing all kinds of mental gymnastics to try to justify their actions. Our society has become more upset with accusations of being racist than they are with the issue of racism itself. To build a truly anti-racist society, we must all be making an active effort to look inside of ourselves, evaluate where we stand in times of injustice and the roles we've played in it, and be very intentional about unlearning our biases. Racism is not only ingrained in our societal structure, but in each of our individual psyches. So oftentimes we do not realize that the things we say could be bigoted. Making major societal change is a very long, exhaustive process. It's very hard and filled with discomfort, but it is imperative. And we can start the movement with small changes. This can be done by correcting your peers when they say something offensive or checking your own language before you speak. I know older generations like to heckle teenagers and young adults for policing language and are quick to accuse us of buying into cancel culture, but I think this is mostly beneficial. Our generation has created a space for people to be recognized and respected for their entire identities. In a time where racism comes in a more subtle and discreet form, I think correcting the little words and actions is exactly what we need to be doing. So I have just a few questions that I want you all to ponder right now and throughout the rest of the day. What do you say about groups of marginalized people when there's no one around part of that group to listen? What do you allow the people in your circle to say about people who are different than you when there's no one part of that group to listen? And how do you respond when someone calls you out on your offensive behavior? Do you attempt to understand the other person's point of view and learn from your mistakes, or do you immediately get defensive? You all might be thinking that these efforts to correct yourself might be pointless in the larger scheme of things, that nothing you alone do could ever possibly make a difference. None of us have the individual power to make sweeping societal changes. However, if every single one of us takes the time to re-examine ourselves, our biases, and how they affect our behaviors, we can each figure out ways that we can contribute to racial justice. All of our roles will look different in this process. For some of us, correcting language is exactly what we should be doing, and we should stay in that lane, while others of us may be called directly to the front lines of protest. Then, with all of our collective efforts, that is how we create this sweeping change. That is how we begin to effectively create the world that MLK dreamed for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Theron. Good morning. My name is Lauren Martin, class of 25, and my pronouns are she, her. And I serve as one of the co-chairs for MLK Convocation. Thank you all so much for your time and attention this morning. It is now my absolute pleasure to introduce our speaker, Father Joseph Brown. Joseph Brown, a native from East St. Louis, Illinois, is a Catholic priest and member of the Society of Jesus. He graduated from St. Louis University with a Bachelor's of Art in Philosophy and Letters in 1968. With graduate degrees from Johns Hopkins University and Yale University, Father Brown has taught at Creighton University, the University of Virginia, Xavier University, where he was the director for the Institute for Black Catholic Studies from 1991 to 94, and at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, where he's a professor in the Africana Studies Department. The Africana Studies Department is located in the School of Africana and Multicultural Studies at SIUC. As of July 1st, 2022, he assumed the duties of serving as the director of this new school. In addition to having been National Black Catholic Congress liturgist in 1992 in New Orleans, in 2002 in Chicago, he has published many articles in African American literary criticism and cultural studies. He also composes the blog, The Sankofa Muse. He presents frequently at the Archbishop James Lake Liturgical Conference and in many areas of the country. He's the author of Accidental Grace in 1986, A Retreat with Thea Bowman and Bed Abram Leaning on the Lord, 1997, To Stand on the Rock, Meditations on Black Catholic Identity, 1996, Sweet, Sweet Spirit, Prayer Services in the Black Catholic Tradition, in 2006, and The Sun Whispers, Wait, New and Collected Poems, 2009. He was the holder of the McLean Chair of Jesuit Studies at St. Joseph University in Philadelphia during the fall of 2009. He was the founding chair of the 1917 Centennial Commission and Cultural Initiative, which was charged with presenting events to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the 1917 East St. Louis Race Massacre Program. Please join me in welcoming Father Joseph Brown.
Anyone who knows me, and there are about 4 or 5 people here who do, they will tell you that you never know what to expect when I get in front of a microphone. Well, I'm here to tell you that I never know what to expect when I listen to someone at a microphone. The best thing this school has ever done was to give her a standing ovation. Yes, I have taught at Creighton, the University of Virginia, Johns Hopkins, Xavier University in New Orleans, and I have gone to school also at Yale. And in the 55 years that I have been teaching one way or another, I have never heard anyone be as prophetically, powerfully accurate as this young woman this morning. Which means that there's at least somebody here who actually does live up to the Brebeuf mission statement. Yeah, that's where I'm headed. She gave the speech for today. I'm here to confirm her as an elder of the community. But I'm here to do something else. In your mission statement, you are called to discover God's presence in everyday life. We are told that the Rebuff community embraces the fullness and diversity of creation, and it accepts and respects all people, and encourages genuine interreligious and intercultural dialogue. And we just got told that that doesn't happen here all the time. And that people are, in a reflexive way, frightened of discomforting language. Yeah, I know that already. When I started high school, I was the only black student in the entire school. Well, let me put that a different way. I was the only black person in the building. And that was 3 of my 4 years in high school. I had to be everything that everybody wanted me to be, and no one allowed me to define myself. Now that's a problem of every person alive who goes to high school. Well, you don't know enough. Well, you just wait. Are you just so, oh, no. Don't be, give yourself some time. You're not really sure. Excuse me. The first thing I want to say is what I was going to conclude with this morning. You are not the future of America. You are its present. The term that somebody here who took a class of mine heard me talk about the first day of class. Who defines the terms by which we live? Martin Luther King, when he was arrested, which means, of course, that we're celebrating somebody today that the United States defined as a criminal. Let's think about that. Another black man in jail. That's one of the other things he had in common with with every civil rights leader we had in the 1950s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s and 2000s and 2020s. I will go to jail. Well, when he was in jail, he wrote those ministers and religious leaders in Birmingham who told him, y'all, you know what? You just agitate. Why don't you just be patient and wait? It's all going to change someday. How many days do I have to wait before somebody knows who I am? One of the greatest heroes in my book of the civil rights movement is Miss Ruby Sales. She's alive today because a young white seminarian jumped in front of her when somebody was aiming a gun at her in Lowndes County, Alabama, to kill her when she was 18 years old. And the young white man jumped in front of her and took the bullet and died. We also have to remember that the song is not just about Abraham Lincoln's birthday. It's also sung, it was sung in honor of John Brown, a white agitator who wound up being hanged by America because he was trying to disrupt the order of the day. Now here's the problem, young people. If you're going to follow this mission statement, you're going to have to decide to disrupt the order of your day. Not about being loud and rambunctious in class, not about cussing out all sorts of people under your breath because you don't want your parents to know that you know the language they taught you. Oh, I know how that works. Remember, she said I was from East St. Louis. I know how a lot of stuff works. Disrupt the order of the day. Miss Ruby Sales is still going around this country telling people what it means to have her life saved when somebody wanted to stop the progress. But she has a very famous interview she did on public radio, and she talked about how she was working in a high school, and she was uncomfortable, just wasn't all this, and she the slaughter of the innocents, the holy innocents, happens just a couple of days after Christmas. When Herod said, I don't want nobody to come in here and disrupt my life. Guess what? The boy babies and the girl babies are still being killed in America. And they're still being killed all over the world where America makes its money. And that's why King got killed. By the time he wasn't even 40 years old when they had a huge list on him. They're calling his wife, telling him about what his private life on the road was like. They called him up and told him, if you don't stop what you're doing, we're going to make sure we take care of you, Negro. We don't have a holiday for King because he got born. We have a holiday for King because people like his widow and Stevie Wonder and a whole bunch of other folks didn't want nobody to forget that he got murdered by America. In 1967, he gave a speech, A Time to Break the Silence. Martin Luther King pretty much signed his death warrant when he came out against a war. And he said that the greatest problems we have are the triple evils of militarism, army, force, materialism, economic exploitation, and racism. Last week, I think it was last week, I get confused, I'm so old, the son of the leader of the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico got arrested, and they were talking about how they arrested him and they all went in there and they want him extradited and all this other stuff, and how much of his cartel, his drug organization, supplies fentanyl to America. We have a problem on the border. King talked about all of this, and he was totally inconvenient, challenging, and religiously prophetic. And he said, why are we allowing this to happen? I've been preaching and teaching about drugs as a motive of American economy since America was founded. Since America was founded, think about enslavement. And think about bringing people over here to create agricultural profit. Alcohol, sugar, caffeine, come on now. All helping the Industrial Revolution. Keep them pumped up and keep them quiet. Frederick Douglass tells us that when it was harvest time was over on the plantations, they would roll out barrels of alcohol to keep the slaves drunk and doing athletic contests. It sounds like the Super Bowl, but that's neither here nor there. So that they would get so drunk and so happy and so tired that they wouldn't think about running away when they weren't being captured in work in the fields. We're doing it. The drug problem in America, some of it was fueled by the war in Vietnam. Some of it has been fueled by the war that we did in Afghanistan. Places where drugs have always been an economic factor for those countries. America has been involved in military actions. My former brother-in-law came back from Vietnam an alcoholic. But he would write me and tell me about how many of the soldiers wound up dead in front of the barracks because of drug overdoses. Well, today, one of the biggest problems we have in this country are the homeless military veterans who come back with PTSD and all sorts of other traumas and are living on the streets. I'll just bring you up a couple of issues. Black people are not the cause of their problems. Well, you know, it's broken families. Excuse me, America was built on broken families. It was illegal for black people to be married if they were enslaved. And the whole point of control of the slavery culture was to separate families. A child could be born and the mother could be sold within 6 months. A child could be born and the father could be killed within 5 or 6 months or sent to another plantation. The broken black family was always part of America's design. Keep them fragile, keep them traumatized, and therefore we can keep them under our control. That has not changed. The broken family. Look at the prescriptions against literacy. It's a crime to teach a black person how to read and write from the 1600s to the 2023 years. Oh, no, it's not a crime. We're just not going to put any money into the public school system in the urban areas because, after all, it's all based on property taxes. Well, all these people live in substandard housing and they rent, so they don't have property taxes, so we don't fund our schools. So therefore, these children are not being taught well and educated for the future like people here at Brebeuf are. And so therefore, they're going to wind up from the school to prison pipeline. And guess what? We have made the prisons a profit motive. So the more children who grow up angry, frustrated, and convinced that they have no future end up in jail if they can be alive after the age of 18, and somebody's making a profit off of it. And the legal system, the political system, the economic system wants to make sure that we have enough laws to keep people in jail because somebody is making money off of the bodies of the black, the brown, and the white poor. And King talked about that, and he wasn't supposed to talk about it. So what are we supposed to be doing here today? I am the oldest person in the building. Why did they laugh? Why are you laughing? I'm just glad I'm here to be laughed at. I'm the oldest person in the building, but I'm sitting there listening to one of the youngest people I've ever seen stand up and say, I don't care what you do. I have to tell you the truth. And here's my main point for this morning. Got a lot of them. Brought all these books and all these notes. And then I said, well, she just did my speech, so I don't know what I'm going to do. Yes, I do. I'm here to tell you this. Love. It's always been about love. And if I have a problem with Christianity and all the other great religions, Muslim, Jewish, whatever, we don't actually follow Scripture. Never have, and I'm hoping we do. King did. King says it. I don't care what you do to us, we're going to love you. You can arrest us, we will love you. You can beat us, we will love you. You can take away all of our resources, and we will love you. Why? Because as he also said, before you got here, we were here. We built this country. Now, what are you supposed to do about that? The first thing you have to do is say thank you. The second thing you have to do is say, it don't work no more, so how can we fix it? How can we change it? If you will only trust your intuitions, if you will only trust that deepest part of you that you will not share with others because you don't know what they're going to say about you or do to you, but that's the point. I was there. I'm an exact contemporary and know some of the people who have been called the Little Rock Nine. And I asked 3 of them one day on television, was it worth it? I know what trauma is. I know what it means to be afraid to speak in public. Because my high school, every time we had anything like this, I was dragged out of every class I was in so I could be in a picture so they could put it in the newspaper. See, we got one Negro. I don't want my picture taken to this day because I was traumatized by people using my very being for their benefit. And everybody in here has a moment like that, and I know it. I looked around this room before this all got started, and I was staring at people, and I watched how quick they averted their eyes because they didn't want to be stared at. Well, guess what? Stand up. Be looked at. Be listened to. And don't give up until you define yourself the way you know you're being called to. And it's all about love, my young people. When Moses finally got them out of Israel, out of Egypt, they had to make a promise. God said, okay, now I heard you. One of the great old songs that people have messed up so badly for so many years that I have had to write people at MSNBC and the New York Times to say, y'all stop messing with our sacred music. And one of those songs is, Come By Here. Someone needs you, Lord, come by here. Somebody is crying, Lord, come by here. Somebody is dying, Lord, come by here. And they groaned in their oppression, and God heard them, and he delivered them. He said, okay, now listen. I done delivered you from slavery. What you gonna do? I guess the golden calf didn't work, did it, God? No, it didn't work. That is not what I wanted you to do. It was take all your jewelry and all your gold and turn it into a calf. That's not my point. Remember that you used to be slaves. So anybody who's a stranger among you, treat them with the same respect that I treated you. And Jesus says, you know what the whole law is? To love the Lord your God with your whole heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the second part of it is to love your neighbor as yourself. And then Jesus lived his life and died because he kept talking to people who were outcast, criminals, sick, diseased, and women. He talked to all the people the establishment said you shouldn't be talking to them. And Jesus said, oh, not am I going to talk to them, I want to heal them. In fact, I'm going to raise a couple of them back from the dead. Oh, you can't do that. We're going to come after you. I know. But the whole point was, Jesus came to tell us there are no strangers. There are no aliens. We are all bonded together. So if I want somebody to know who I am, I have to take the risk to listen to who they are. And here is my point. Believe them. If you want to be believed, believe them. Personal story. I was raped when I was 5 years old by 2 teenage girls under a porch in East St. Louis. 5 years old, you don't know how to say nothing about none of that, so I never could tell anybody. When I was 7, I was sexually assaulted for the second time by somebody I loved dearly. And I wasn't going to get that person in trouble, so I kept my mouth shut. So I wound up having migraine headaches and stomach upset. There was things I couldn't swallow and things I couldn't think about. And I would get these migraines, and my father would say, "You're not as sick as you're pretending to be." It took me until a year after he was dead to forgive him. He did not see my pain. If he had accepted it, I might have been able to crawl into his lap and tell him why I was suffering. But that's America. That's the Dakotas. But that's El Salvador. That's Argentina. That's Puerto Rico. That's Chicago. That is East St. Louis. That's Indianapolis. That's Brebeuf Jesuit Preparatory High School. If only somebody would say, "Tell me where it hurts and I will believe you." Think of what America would be. We wouldn't have to have protests, demonstrations, and violence against property. Because remember this, race riots up until the 1960s were always white people killing black people en masse. We just celebrated Rosewood, commemorated Rosewood down in Florida, where they wiped out an entire black community. White mobs going in to kill black people. Think about the white mobs dressed in uniforms killing the Native Americans. When black people riot, they don't go into white neighborhoods and kill white people. They destroy property. But then again, they have been considered property since the beginning of America. I'm going to do to your property what you've done to me. I'm not going to come out there and kill you. But I'm hurting and you will not listen to me. King stood up and spoke for us all and told us, "I am representing those who cry out in the darkness. I am representing those that went into the swamps and have never been found. I am telling the world that if you refuse to listen to my pain, you refuse to deal with your own. Help me heal you by keeping me alive and listening to my truth." So young people, I drove all the way up here to tell y'all that y'all know what you're doing. I drove all the way up here to tell you that if you know who you are, you can tell the whole world what it is and what it must be. Don't wait for a diploma. Don't wait for a job contract. Don't wait for anything that somebody else uses to define who you are. You're not a stranger. You're not an alien. Everybody belongs at the welcome table. And as another old song said, there's plenty good room in my Father's kingdom. But you know the song that really is the most important one for me today? If I have light, no matter how dark it is, I'm going to let my light shine, because my light is one thing: the truth that will set me free. And if I let you see my light, if I let you see my light, realize that I'm giving it to you because I don't want you in darkness either. So you have my blessing and my anointing. You have been called to greatness with a little bitty light. You have been called to change this world with an awful lot of stubbornness. If we don't know who you are, we will never know who we are. So let your little light shine, people. Let your little light shine.
I don't know about you all, but I just like, it's a, thank you, and thank him. Wow, okay. I needed a minute. Thank you, Father Brown. Good morning, friends. My name is Kayla Storrs, Miss Storrs, pronoun she, her, hers. And for those of you who don't know me, I know we've got some parents and some community members. I serve as our Director of Equity and Inclusion. And so one of the cool things about MLK Convocation, if you haven't noticed, is that outside of this little Q&A that I'm getting ready to facilitate, and Mr. Van Slam's closing, start to finish, this is a student-led convocation. So when we began them this morning and we recognized our committee members and our BSU president, Michaela, who's hanging out with us up here today, know that this is work that was put in by your peers who understood that there was a need for a very specific message here. The message today came from the brainchild of your peers. And so I think that this was perfect to hear Father Brown talking about you all as young people leaning into who you are, knowing who you are, and not allowing us adults to tell you who you are. But that also means that we as adults have to open up ourselves to get to know you all as students. We have to be open to those experiences and those stories and the difficult knots that come in our stomach when a student shares something with us, but finding comfort in the fact that we've created a bond with a student in which they feel comfortable sharing with us. Tell me where it hurts. Tell me where it hurts, and I will heal you. It's what I'm taking from this morning. And I encourage you all and your peers, though you may not always be able to see what's going on. You know yourself and you know your peers, and I imagine you can feel it. How awesome is it to create that space for your peers? Tell me where it hurts, Lauren. Tell me where it hurts, Braden. Tell me where it hurts, Bryn, Emma, Dawn, Greg, Beth. Tell me where it hurts. Man, thank you. So we've got some time for some Q&A this morning. We want to give you all the opportunity to pick Father Brown's brain, whether that be about his address to you all. He also has a really fascinating life, being the oldest person in the room. He's got some experience. But at this time, we would like to open it up for a few questions from our audience. We've got 2 mics. Yes, Max. Thank you, Max. And thank you to our tech team who works way harder than we do half the time to make sure that these things are streaming and available for you all. Yes. And yes. And yes. So we've got 2 mics, one on each side of the room. I'm going to give our podium mic back to Father Brown to answer you all's questions, and I've got our cordless mic here that I will facilitate. But if you have questions, we're going to ask you to go ahead and line up, choose one of the mics, whether to my left or to my right, and this is you all's chance to deepen the conversation with Father Brown regarding all things MLK Convocation today. So again, if you have questions, we'll ask you to come up to these mics. Right here. Father Brown, you ready? Father Brown stays ready. And let's see. Gummy? There we go. Okay. So I will facilitate the questions. Questions for Father Brown. Questions about how you to your role in creating this beautiful space that welcomes, values, and celebrates all, as we are all created in God's image. Questions? No, I'm a high school student. We got some questions. Sure. I mean, I'm in high school. We work with high school students. We got questions. They got questions. See, look at them. They just needed a little nudge. I get how nerve-wracking it can be to come up to the mic and, oh, look, there we go. Okay, so, oh, Max, do you have a question?
I do have a question.
Well, then let's start with Max. We'll go Max, and then right over here, if you will, name, class, and go ahead with your question. Pronouns if you feel comfortable.
Hello. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Max Kitchell from class 24, he, him. Father Brown, and you talked at one point about don't wait for a college diploma, don't wait for a job to get in and start doing things. How do I, as an individual, identify those areas? How do I get involved in those movements?
If you don't allow yourself to be seduced by your cell phone and social media, if you will do something that some of the Jesuits have probably tried to teach you and some of the other faculty, to have about 5 or 10 minutes a day to be quiet, you might hear things. And if you hear it in your heart, if you listen with your heart, you'll know exactly, okay, I got to do something. Somebody I just love to death has been talking to me since he was 6 years old about bullies in school and how does he help them in grade school. Well, it's sooner or later I found out that he was asking that question because he was the one being bullied. But when we talked about this, he basically decided he was going to start stepping up and helping people out who were being bullied. He wanted to know how to help. Well, if you can do that in grade school, you can do that in high school, you can do that anywhere. You know, the question is, oh God, if I say something, what's going to happen to me? But as we were listening to the quotation, if I don't say something, what is going to happen to them and me? So therefore, how do you get involved? It can be anywhere. It's not just about doing fundraisers to buy food for the hungry and clothes for the impoverished. It's about doing what King said. Ask why there is poverty in the first place. Ask why there's poverty. When he gave that famous reflection twice, his last year of life, about when he and Mrs. King went to Israel and they were going down the Jericho road, and he stopped to think about the Good Samaritan. And he said it's always important to do what you can to help those who are beaten up and oppressed and left on the side of the road. But why is there poverty? It's not that some people are privileged and other people don't deserve it. It's who is making money off of everything. That can be done on any local level. But if you know that there's somebody, again, to answer your question, if you've listened to some of your classmates, friends, or members of the family, or even if you use it responsibly, social media, you know exactly to say, excuse me. We were told that also right there. Don't wait to speak. Just say something in class, in the cafeteria, wherever, at a game. Why are you making those comments? When I used to teach at the University of Virginia, it was always, I could count on it. The week after Thanksgiving, students would come back and say, God, you will not believe what happened in my family for Thanksgiving dinner. Based on what I've been learning in your class, I had to get all in somebody's face. Oh, well, thank you. I'm glad about that. It can be just that simple to tell your cousin, your uncle, or your other person in the family, you shouldn't say that because I got friends that would be hurt if they knew what you thought. That's speaking up for social justice.
All right. right, and it looks like I'm looking at time. These will be our 4 questions. Go ahead, Becky.
Amy Lom, class of 2023, pronoun she, her. How do you help a friend who is hurting?
Have I?
How?
How have I helped a person?
How do you,
How do you
specifically,
help?
in general, whatever works?
By listening. The most important thing to do is to say, there's an African saying of greeting, I see you, we see you. And the response is, and it is good to be seen. It could be just as simple as saying, whatever it is, just tell me. I will not judge you. It's amazing how powerful that can be. It's your silent acceptance of another person's story. If you believe them, you're going to be changed by it, and they'll know it. You don't have to do anything big, dramatic, and, with a sequel. No, you don't have to do all that. You just have to say, I hear you, I see you, you matter. Really, it is that simple. That's what I have seen all from the time I was in 2nd grade, when I used to have all sorts of anniversaries in the East St. Louis, Metro St. Louis area. My classmate, Jacqueline Mosley, would always get up and tell the story about how I used to make sure she was eating right in the 2nd grade because she had a heart problem, and I wanted to make sure she was eating right. I'm 7 years old. What do I know? So, that's where it got started. Thank you.
How did you know, when and how did you know, what you wanted to do with your life?
I never have. No, I'm being very, very serious. People colluded. They talk about collusion in government and politics. Well, I couldn't trust my relatives, and I still don't. My mother and father worked it out with the people in my school. Oh, he'd be happy to do that, sister. Did we ask him? No. We just told him he's going to. And when I went into the seminary, into the Jesuits, the priests and other people were telling me, all I ever wanted to do in my life was be a high school English teacher. What is it I have never done? Be a high school English teacher. Well, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this. I'm 12 years old. I'm getting off a bus to go to a high school program in Madison, Wisconsin, and somebody got sick. So that one of the people organizing it told the nun on our bus, we don't have anybody to stand up there and be the MC. Oh, he'll be glad to do it. No, I won't. So I have actually, the people that, it's called faith. The people that I believe in tell me, I see something in you that you don't see. And I have had the experience of saying, well, okay then, I guess I'll try it. And it has worked always, except for horseback riding.
Round us out, William.
My name is William Lemaster of the class of 2023, he, him, and when we are having these difficult conversations that make us uncomfortable, uneasy in the classroom or otherwise, is it best when someone tries to shut that conversation down due to those feelings to say no, or is it best to concede that and just keep initiating those conversations at other times?
Both. Say no, and then keep coming back. That's following Martin Luther King and all the great civil rights activists from the 1500s on. I'm telling you no matter what, but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep right on doing it until you wind up being worn down, because we shall overcome.
Thank you.
All right, we are getting ready to round out our convocation this morning. I want to thank you so much for your perspective and thank you for your questions. There's a lot to think about, and lucky for you, you have 3 days, because you get a 3-day weekend, to think about these things. But let us not forget that our 3-day weekend is a memorial to Martin Luther King Jr., his legacy and the work that he's doing. So in addition to thinking about the challenges that have been posed to us by Father Brown, Theron, and shortly Layla, let us also find a way to get involved in service and stand up and act this Monday in reverence and memorial to Martin Luther King Jr. I'm excited now to introduce our final student reflector, Junior Layla Packett.
Good morning, Rebuff. My name is Layla Packett from the class of 2024, and today I am here to discuss how we as young leaders and as a community can continue to live Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy. One of his most thoughtful quotes states, "Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others?" He said this to a crowd in Montgomery, Alabama in 1957, and while that was over 65 years ago, it still rings true today. We as students at Brebeuf Jesuit are called to be men and women for others while being committed to promoting justice, open to growth, intellectually competent, loving, and religious. Pushing every single day to uplift one another in beneficial ways, whether that be mentally, physically, or spiritually, is crucial to society. So much of the negative words and actions we see on social media today are rooted in evil and a small-minded outlook on life. MLK's legacy is rooted in commitment to growth and progression. The mindset that we all were born and created equal in our society is up for debate in many areas around the world. However, I believe it shouldn't be. It only takes one person to make a difference or a change in mindsets, cultures, ideas, and more. People like MLK, Malcolm X, Claudette Colvin, Rosa Parks, W.E.B. Du Bois, Mary White Ovington, and many more influential people have fought and died to take steps in the right direction to try to change the culture. Our duty as men and women for others, not for ourselves, is and should always be to continue these steps and eventually eradicate the division in our country. Whether you see it or not, it is there. Whether you feel it or not, it is there. Whether you believe it or not, it is there. To continue to pursue his legacy, certain actions need to be taken. For example, some steps in the right direction could be putting more money into our public school systems, peaceful and proactive protesting focused on demanding justice, voting for government officials who promote change in the way you see fit to provide equity and inclusion, getting rid of performative justice, getting jobs where you can impact the community for the benefit of yourself and others, and educating yourself on perspectives that do not align with yours to promote self-growth and mindfulness. Although it may seem easy for me to stand here today and preach about the things we could do, it's important to listen to understand rather than listen to dispute. Listening is the key word to all of this. Listen to your friends when they speak up. Listen to individuals in prison about the inhumane circumstances in which they are living. Listen to your teachers when they're teaching about equity and equality. Listen to that gut feeling in the pit of your stomach telling you something is wrong, and speak up. Listen. Listen and try to better understand the challenges your peers face that are different from your own. Sometime last year, I overheard a comment that has stuck with me and not in the best way. I heard someone say something along the lines of, "We have an Asian student union and a black student union. Why don't we have a white student union?" My immediate thought was, wow, I cannot believe I had just heard that, but at the same time I could. My next thought was, this already is that kind of safe space for them. The comment was probably said as a joke, and I try not to take it too seriously, but nevertheless it stuck with me. The majority of my education has been surrounded by white peers, learning about white history and institutions made for them. We black students in our personal histories, but also our black histories, have been othered throughout largely our entire education so far. We just want to be a part of something, so see ourselves reflected in the space around us. Did they not understand that? I found myself wondering, how could someone make such a comment? If those are their words, what are their actions? What are they doing, if anything, to be proactive against injustice and to be a person for others? Is this symbolic of our lack of concern for others? Is this symbolic of privilege? When is it their turn to listen and learn about Black history? When is it their turn to listen and learn about Latinx, Native American, and Asian history? The time is now to look within yourself, to choose the alternative to silence, to choose the alternative to complying with social norms, to choose the alternative to racism. Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? So my question to the Brebeuf community is, what are we doing? How are we as a community of men and women and people for others going to choose anti-racism every single day? How are we going to make Brebeuf a truly welcoming space for all students? How are we going to be better and continue to fulfill Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy of justice? I challenge you to step outside of yourself and put yourself in someone else's shoes as we go on today. I challenge you to be mindful of your words and actions towards others. I challenge you to pursue fulfilling his legacy from here and moving forward. We all have a responsibility to each other as peers and as brothers and sisters in Christ, to love each other as Jesus has loved us, in our fullness, in all of our beauty and glory, in all of our diversity. The change starts with you today. Thank you.
Everything just all tied together. People are going to think we're Step all over me. Oh, no, go ahead and step all over me. I don't care.
Okay. Let's take a moment to thank Mr. Tipple and our choir who have worked diligently to prepare the special music for today's convocation. I'm right here, you know what I'm saying? Okay, a huge thank you to Father Brown. My name is Ray Lewis from the class of 2024, and I'm one of the MLK co-chairs. Thank you all for your time and attention this morning. I hope something I shared with you today, whether that be from Father Brown and his address, from your peer reflectors, and sharing their experiences and their questions posed, has stuck with you. We are tasked with being men, women, people for others. We may truly live up to that task and take on the challenge that has been presented with both Theron and Layla. Now for Mr. Van Slarenberg with our closing prayer.
Good morning. On behalf of all of Brebeuf Jesuit, and from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank the BSU and Layla and Theron and Father Brown in particular. Just a prayer of gratitude this morning. Let's take a moment, take a breath. God, we are grateful for the opportunity we've had this morning. We're grateful to be a community that can be together in love and in discomfort. And we're grateful for our life together. Please join me in the prayer for generosity. Lord, teach me to be generous. Teach me to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the costs, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and not to ask for any reward, save that of knowing that I do your will. Amen. Okay, we have about 10 minutes before period 7. Period 7 begins at 10:55. I'm going to ask the teachers to go now, and everybody else give them a second to get to the classrooms. In the bleachers, students, you're going to stay there for a few minutes. I'm going to dismiss you one section at a time. Seniors and others on the floor, go ahead. All right, we're going to start with this side over here. Everybody on this side, where I'm waving over here, go ahead. This side, hang out for a minute. Yeah, choir, why don't you head out through the library that way when you're ready. And then this section over here, split yourselves. I would suggest going towards the library if you're in this way.